Hello, hello, good morning. Welcome back to session 2 of the Nonprofit Management Institute. It's good to see faces out there. We're going to be jumping into board governance today. We're going to actually spend some time going over your capacity assessment results as well. Before we do that, please go ahead and take a moment to update your name on your Zoom handle. You can do that by clicking on those 3 dots that you see by your picture and renaming. Be helpful to see first and last name and maybe your organization if you have it, your pronouns if you'd like to include those. We will be using some of the annotate features that we used last week, which you'll find up above in the view options. We'll direct you when it's time for those. Today's session is being recorded. We do invite you to use your raise your hand if you have questions, to go ahead and pose questions in the chat. And we invite you, like it says here, to invite your video. I see lots of folks enabling their video so that we can see faces. It's really helpful for our presenter, Dr. Palmer. And I wanted to also mention that you will need some blank paper today. So at your first break, if you want to grab those, that would be great. Or if you have them nearby, get some markers, whatever you like to write with. Make sure you have your workbook in front of you. We do send out reminder emails the day before each session and then wraparound emails. And those come from our Salesforce account. So be sure to check your junk or spam folders if you're not seeing those. And in those emails, you'll find all the materials that you need for each session. So we do send a digital copy of each session's pages. So you have the digital and also hopefully paper if you've received in the mail. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Lisa, to thank our sponsors and partners for today.
Sure. I just want to first say good morning. I too would like to welcome you back to day 2. Everyone looks so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I think. Make sure you have your coffee. I'd like to send a warm welcome from our ED, Jean Tedrow. She couldn't be with us here today, but she wishes you a great day of training. So with that, I'd like to thank our sponsors, our partners and sponsors, which, as you can see on the screen, C. Smith Reynolds, the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, the Earl and Catherine Condon Family Foundation, and Duke Continuing Studies. So let's get ready to go over our agenda for today. As you can see, pretty packed again with our board governance material today, as Rebecca has alluded to already. These are the areas that we'll be going through today that Dr. Palmer will be going through in pretty in detail. Board governance, everything you've always wanted to know and was afraid to ask. Duties and expectations, financial management, accountability and evaluation, composition, bylaws, and legal compliance. And as Rebecca's already stated, please make sure you have your paper, pencil, pens, markers. You're doing some drawing today and some writing. So if there are any questions on that, moving on to our, as we talked about last session about safe spaces to brave spaces, just like to keep reiterating the respect we'd like to have within our group and within our cohort is very important. So again, as you can see here, we encourage participation from all people. We respect the inherent humanity and perspective of others. We all take responsibility to demonstrate a collective commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. So please, we all would appreciate if we can just follow these safe space to brave spaces rules. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Palmer. We have a pretty busy day, so I want to get us going. And here she is, Dr. Palmer.
We can go to gallery view. Thank you, team. As everyone has already said, well, good morning, and it's good to see all of you. Hopefully, I'm a coffee drinker, so hopefully for those of you who require coffee, tea, or I don't know, I see some cups there. Some of you might require take in what Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Sprite, I don't know, but whatever it is that is your preference, by all means, if you haven't gotten that already, feel free to do so. I like to have coffee before I even have food. So go for it. But it is good to see you all. And hopefully you've had an opportunity to maybe not necessarily review what we shared and what we worked on last week, but to at least think about it, in terms of how that information and how the work that we did can help you in your respective roles. So the first thing I want to do is just to inquire with you about what you remember from last week's session. And if you would just put that in the chat. So don't go back and look at your workbook or open up your folder or anything like that. It's not a pop quiz. I just kind of want to get a sense of just what comes to mind for you from last week. What is it that you remember? Like what is that one thing that when you think about the 3 hours that we spent together last week, what is it that you recall? And I'm just going to pause a minute here, let you pop those in the chat, and we're gonna pay attention, team, to what they've shared. Okay. I see build, thrive, and sustain. Wow, I see that. Those were the management conditions in terms of thinking about where our organization might be as it relates to a particular practice or principle. The assessment, we did 2 assessments, a basic assessment, and then we did kind of a lean-in type of advanced assessment related to the topics that we're gonna learn more about throughout the Institute. I see the 12 principles. Let's see. There's some other comments here that are more about just kind of commentation. If I could get some folks, the team, to just kind of
going fast. I'm trying to keep up.
I see it. It's like it's populating really, really quick.
So it was great to understand where we are and what is needed to move on from the building stage into thriving as a new org. What else we see here? Is a continuum of organizational building and process is not static. Yep. Looking at build, strive, sustain, and knowing that we toggle between each. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's see for right now.
Okay. Well, when you think about beginning a process of building our capacity, be it our individual capacity as individuals that work in nonprofit organizations, or building the capacity of the organization as a whole. One of my practices is to take an assessment, is to get a sense of where am I now, so that I can begin to think about how I want to change, how I want to adjust, how I want to enhance, how I want to improve. And so that is why we start this Institute off that way. We want to, one, yes, introduce you to those principles and to those practices, but we also want to leave you with a way of thinking about assessment and looking at capacity. Today, our topic is about board governance. So that is our focus. It is very important for us, whether we're the executive director, president, and CEO, or we serve in another role within our nonprofit organizations. It is important for us to partner and collaborate with our board of directors. And what better way to help them understand our reality than to be able to share with them where we are as it relates to our capacity? Because oftentimes our boards will want us to engage in work that is very important to our community, that is necessary, but we may not necessarily have the capacity to do some of what they want us to do. And so as we go into board governance and all the other topics down the road, we want to bring into this work where we are as it relates to capacity. So that said, are there any, and you can unmute yourself if you'd like, are there any just comments that anyone has that you didn't put in the chat that you would like to share audibly in the space this morning? We're going to go into breakouts and do a little bit of work right out of the gate this morning. So any thoughts about that you want to share out loud from last week? Okay. And go for that second or third cup of coffee then. I'm finishing up my first. So what we want to do now is we're going to go into breakout rooms. And we have set up our breakout rooms so that they're fairly small. And what we want you to do this morning is to spend some time doing some introductions. So you're going to share who you are and your organization, and just give your colleagues just a few nuggets about who you are and what you do, and a little bit about your organization. We want you to do that, but we also want you to share maybe one or two best practices that your nonprofit board engages in as it relates to board governance. So you're going to share a little bit about who you are and your organization, what you do. And then you're also going to share best practices related to board governance in terms of a couple of best practices that your board engages in as a board of directors. We all good? All right. I think Rebecca has it set up where we're going to have at least 10 groups. And so there should be, 3 or 4 folks in each group. We wanted to make those small enough that you could kind of have some dialogue. The breakouts will last for 10 minutes. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Palmer. I'm going to go ahead and open up the rooms. We'll broadcast to the breakouts that you all are going to be introducing yourselves and talking about best practices related to board governance. I'll go ahead and set the timer here for 10 minutes, and we'll see you all back here shortly.
Well, welcome back from the breakout sessions. If we could go ahead and we didn't ask you to have anybody to report out or anything like that, but if you could put some of those practices in the chat, would be great. And again, what we were doing in our breakouts was getting to know each other a little bit better. Last week, we had you do that by posting where you were on the North Carolina map, so we could kind of see what counties were represented and where we all are in terms of that. And then today we wanted you to kind of be in a smaller space, group space, and kind of do those intros. And we'll continue to do that as we move along, just so that you know who you're working with, or who your fellow colleagues are in the Institute. And I see some of everything in the chat in terms of best practices. How many of you are actually, and we're going to get to this even a little deeper down the road, but how many of you actually serve on a board? Because I know we're here as it relates to nonprofit management and working in nonprofit organizations and so on. So yeah, that's typically how it goes. Not only do we work in a nonprofit organization, but we also serve on boards and committees and so on and so forth in our communities. So we get to look at this from both lenses. Thank you for sharing those practices, and Rebecca is going to share a resource with you as well.
Yep, sure thing. Dr. Palmer, are we going to share the Facebook poll results?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Let me share this with you all. Some of you have gone ahead and joined the group or requested access. It's private, so this is what the page looks like. Move this out of the way. There we go. This is what the page looks like, and we have all of the existing cohorts have been invited to join. So you all would be the newest participants. What we tend to do is you'll see a little welcome here. We welcome folks from the new cohort, that's you all, to this page. And each week we come up with a poll, some way for you to interact in this way with one another, to kind of get a sense of where we are with the material. For this week, the question was, what practices have had the greatest impact when it comes to developing an engaged, more active board? And looks like we can see down here, was seen by 19 people. You can see all the folks that have seen it. And we had only 2 votes. So I'm hoping that for the next couple polls, we'll have more interactivity on this page if you care to, or you're interested in joining and kind of engaging in this way. But no pressure if you're not. We also know some people are not on Facebook or don't want to mix their private with or personal with their professional. We understand that. So it looks like we had one person who said onboarding and orientation is a good practice that they use. And then this one asking them to do something specific related to their strengths. And then we typically will invite folks to add, maybe there's not something on here, but you think it's a great way to engage or get your boards to be more active. So then we have an option where people can like add it down here in the comments. So just wanted to share this page with you. We provide this link in the wraparound email, and we'll also put it in the chat so you all can join. I can go ahead and pop that in there now.
And it looks like, is it Carrie has joined and she's pending approval. Thank you, Carrie. We appreciate it.
Oh, good.
And if there's anybody else while Rebecca is there, how about we give it 60 seconds, Rebecca? And nothing like real time. So if you, we can go ahead and take care of that little housekeeping task right away. It's always good to have a place to go to either pick up a nugget or two, or to share and to be able to chime in with others. I always find it very helpful for me to engage and have exchanges with folks who are in this capacity building, trying to enhance nonprofits through enhancing our capacity to manage nonprofits. I'm always glad to be able to have exchanges with folks who have that on their minds like I do. So by all means, utilize that platform for that purpose. If we could go to slide 9, that would be great. We're going to pop that up on the screen for you. We're getting ready to kind of get started here doing our hands-on work. Again, we are excited to have each of you here and learning and giving us an opportunity to share the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits capacity building framework for managing nonprofits. And so, as already mentioned, we work from a framework of principles and practices. We have a guide for that. Hopefully everyone has received the electronic PDF of the guide, and or you can reference your workbook. All of that information is there as well. And if you would like additional copies of the guide, we definitely have that available for you. You can communicate with Rebecca or Leslie directly in the chat, and they can tell you how to get more of these resources for your staff, your board, and other individuals that this might be helpful. So we work from principles. We work from a framework of looking at the management condition of nonprofits as to whether or not we are at a build, thrive, or sustain level of functioning. We also operate from the premise of paying attention to the capacity of our nonprofits so that we're able to have the most success that we possibly can. We look at that from a basic capacity assessment perspective and also advanced. We again have 12 principles. And does anybody remember how many practices we have? If you do, put it in the chat for me. And team, we can go on to slide 11. How many practices do we have? There we go, Lisa. They got it. 216 practices, 216, 12 principles, 216 practices, 12 principles. And so we're going to be learning about 6 of these 12. We're going to be honing in on specific work around those. So here is a piece of information that we, this is on page 84 in your book. Let me grab my book. Is it 84? Yes. It's a little bit further back because I referenced this more than once in the Institute. But some of you may be pondering what capacity is all about and what does it really mean. And so here is our way of describing what it means to build capacity, i.e. capacity building, what it means to assess capacity, and what capacity means in general. And so when we think about capacity, we're looking at a nonprofit organization in terms of its ability to manage growth and development, and managing growth and development while pursuing and working to achieve its mission and vision. So when we think capacity, we're looking at various elements of that. For the Institute, we're focusing on nonprofit management, but there are other areas of building capacity as it relates to nonprofit organizations. And it may vary from nonprofit to nonprofit. Capacity assessment. This is our process of reviewing and examining, as we stated before, our current management condition around those 3 frames. And we do that so that we can determine the principles and practices that we want to enhance, so that we can continue with our growth and development as a nonprofit. Capacity assessment, capacity building. When we look at capacity building, or when we do capacity building, we are implementing strategies and we are implementing techniques that we've identified. And we're doing that so we can continue to grow and continue to develop to achieve our mission and vision. And so as we move forward to look at the results and findings that we were able to gather from each of you submitting your capacity assessment last week, we wanted to share these concepts and these terms with you so that we would be clear about what that is. Does anybody have a question related to the 3 terms or concepts? Okay. I don't think I see any. So we're going to move forward. Just remember that this is further into your workbook. It's page 84, if you weren't able to get there before we review that. If we could go back to the gallery, that would be great. And I do believe Rebecca and or Leslie, we want to make sure that everyone received their results and findings, their capacity assessment results, and they got the aggregate one too, right? So they got their individual.
They
Or we're gonna
received
get
their, they received their individual, and then we'll pop the aggregate here in the chat.
Okay, all right. So when you, what we're going to do is we're going to do a review of the results and findings of the capacity assessment as a large group. And then that will help you to be able to study your own individual one, okay? Now, this came up last week when we were completing the assessment. There were questions about how we might be able to use this process. You could have the capacity assessment completed by your board members. You could have the capacity assessment completed by your staff. You could have it completed by both. And you can analyze those results collectively, separately, to kind of help you to understand the perception of those two stakeholder groups as it relates to where they think or what they might think we need to work on as it relates to capacity building. The other thing too to keep in mind is, I think I said this last week, when you're doing strategic planning, we encourage you to consider assessing your capacity as a part of that process, so that when you're developing your strategic plan, you're developing goals and objectives that align with what you have the ability to do. And or if you don't have the ability to work on those things, how you're going to get there so that you can achieve those goals and objectives in your plan. So the capacity assessment results can be used in a lot of different ways. I think the link has been shared for everyone to access it. Here I go. I'm still old school. I got a hard copy here. So you all can share the document just so that, and we'll just kind of walk through and group, we do this as a team. So as we're walking through, you might hear my voice, you might hear Rebecca's voice, you might hear Lisa's voice, you might hear Leslie's voice. As we're walking through this, as we have thoughts about what it is we were able to capture from the information that you provided. So here is the results and findings. We can go ahead to the first nonprofit management principle in the report, which is board governance. And so here is what we identified as being the areas or the practices that we want to work on within the next year. That was the question that we were all answering for each of these. And so for board governance, it looks as though the focus would be on providing board members with a clear job description, orientation, and ongoing training. That this is something that that we want to work on as a cohort. And then when you look at Thrive, there was a little bit of competition there in terms of where the majority of us indicated what we wanted to work on there. There were 44 participants that completed the assessment. So that gives you an idea in terms of percentage. For Sustain, the number one practice that we want to work on is related to roles and responsibilities, evaluating performance, and receiving ongoing training. Now, what's interesting about this, the team and I were having a conversation about these results, is that under Build, we want to work on job descriptions, orientation, and ongoing training. And under Sustain, we want to work on roles and responsibilities, performance, and ongoing training. So if we can address that related to the job descriptions, then we probably are going to impact that first practice under Sustain. So that's kind of where we landed with with board governance. Our next principal management function is program design, management, and evaluation. Under build, a little competition there in terms of inquiring with participants in programs to give their ideas and perspectives, and then also community partners to consult with them to determine the need for programs and services. Those were the two top areas that we want to work on in the next year there. And then for Thrive, it is evaluate programs by looking at achievement of the folks that participate in our programs, and then also community impact. And then as it relates to sustain, it was that first practice there to continue programs that match our mission and vision, and programs that address our community or social conditions or problems. So those are the results for program design, management, and evaluation. Strategic planning is our next area or principle in terms of managing nonprofits. 68% of us said we want to work on asking program participants to share their needs related to the work that we do in our programming. Going to under Thrive, the number one area is an annual review of the plan. So we want to keep that plan in front of us and determine how we're faring each year. Under sustain, it is again an annual review, assessing goal achievement, accomplishments, and challenges. So, so if you have a strategic plan already, I'll just say in play, then it is important to be touching base about how you're doing as it relates to progress. Financial management is our next management function. Top area under build to establish a strategy for financial reserves. I'll just say we all want that, right? We all want to have reserves, but that takes work, and it takes consistent work towards that particular goal. 75% of us said that we want to initiate strategies to diversify our sources of revenue. That's an important one as well, so that we can what? Have reserves. The other is 92% of us said that we want to identify and implement new revenue generating strategies. So financial management, those are the results there in terms of what we want to work on in the next year. Fundraising is our next. Donor activities, programs, informing our donors about what it is that we do, 73%. 57% develop an annual campaign for donor giving. And 81% consider new income sources through social entrepreneurship and earned revenue programs. So fundraising, those are the areas that we said, the practices that are leading the pack there in terms of what we want to work on in the next year. Human resources, number one area, practice, provide staff and volunteers with clear current job descriptions, necessary tools to produce quality work. Under Thrive, those practices look like they're really competing around having a diverse personnel and volunteers, looking at cost of living and merit as it relates to increases in compensation, annual reviews of compensation, and then also performance evaluation for both staff and volunteers. That was a mouthful, but that's kind of what we said we wanted to focus on. Under sustain, what led the practice that was got the most attention there, support ongoing leadership development, educational opportunities, and career paths for staff. One of the things that we know that we're all challenged with, we were challenged with this before COVID and before this season, I'll say, and that is staffing. That is a challenge for a lot of organizations. One, from the in terms of interest in the work that we do as it relates to staffing, and then also compensation. We're competing with organizations and entities that in some cases might be able to offer greater compensation packages. And so we know that that is something that we're all challenged with, and we're all working through that each and every day. So, so again, our 6 areas or nonprofit management functions that we are looking at the results of are board governance, program design, management and evaluation, strategic planning, financial management, fundraising, and human resources. We can go back to gallery, and then I just want to open up the space for any comments about what it is that our results kind of showed us. And then after we do that, we're going to go into breakout so you can spend time with your individual report. So go ahead and get your individual report. Make sure it's available to you. Just in general, though, are there any comments? Jamika, I see your hand.
Yes, with the human resources piece on sustain, I'm wondering if paying a living wage comparable to duties, responsibilities, and expectations is so low because that's kind of I know we're in nonprofit world, but that's kind of, we're close to that happening more so than supporting ongoing leadership development, educational opportunities and career paths for staff. And so that something like that is not quite the higher priority. Like that kind of just stands out to me pretty strongly. And so I'm making a comment with a question mark behind it.
Does anyone have any feedback from where you are in your organization related to Jamika's question around, is that not a priority as it is inferred in the percentage of us that identified that as being something we want to work on in the next year? And you can just unmute yourself, or you don't have to wait on me for that. Do you have any comments about that?
So good morning. This is Nichelle Cole. I think in the early childhood field, that is definitely an issue of, I guess, competing with different industries that now, especially like Amazon, that can pay more, they can kind of do less work. So we're struggling with the whole idea of not just recruiting staff, but recruiting qualified staff, as well as trying to figure out how to stay competitive with the income or the salary, which is a very hard struggle for us, which is probably why I know I picked staffing as the human resource management one. Not sure if that answered, but I think it definitely fits into what you were commenting and questioning about, I think.
And
I think it's really
wondering
difficult that, I'm sorry, I interrupted someone.
go ahead, Jason, I'll go after you.
No, I was just saying, in our situation as a new organization, it's really challenging. I've been involved in new business startups before, and before you can get to that sustain level and even towards the thrive, I mean, it's almost like what you're putting into investing for future growth and the right resources to help you get to where you want to be. I know there's a percentage that you're supposed to be at for an organization to, when it comes to getting grants and ethical practices and so forth. But I almost feel like that number's got to be skewed for you to be able to invest in the resources you need to get into that thrive stage, which where you're actually, things are going smoothly. You got the right people in place, and kind of similar to a business, the profits are there and high enough that it's justifying the employees you're paying. So it's really, it's definitely a challenge, because you get, just like anything in life, you sometimes get what you pay for. And so in our position, everybody's volunteer, and so there's very few people out there who are going to put in the work that's required for a startup and being volunteer without them getting burnt out and leaving. And when they do, it's like starting all over. So it's frustrating trying to find that happy balance.
And I'm wondering too, if some of us maybe didn't prioritize it higher because our budgets are so limited. So we know we can't move the needle on that in the next 12 months. So we were looking, at least for me, when I answered that question, yes, that's probably the number one thing I need to do is increase pay, but I know I can't. And so I focused on or prioritized other choices because I can move the needle on them and can any time I invest can actually show I can see something at the end of the day or the end of the year. So that's the only reason I didn't put that as number one, because in all honesty, that is my number one priority. It should be to increase pay, but I don't have the resources to do that. So I have to focus my time on other things I can influence.
I want to piggyback off that, Stacy, because that is definitely why I didn't prioritize it. We just finished our budget a few weeks ago, and it's just not it's not we don't want to. I very much want to pay my staff more, but we are so grant funded that is not our reality.
There is a question at Lawana, the link to the report was put in the chat. Or are you talking about the individual? That kind of popped up there real quick. Are you needing the individual or are you needing the group results?
Individual.
Oh, okay. All right. So the team is aware, so they'll work on that for you. Thank you all for that feedback. We do want you to spend just a little bit more time with your individual report. So we're going to go into breakouts, and in your breakout, we want you to just kind of share what your results and findings disclose to you. If there was anything surprising or just kind of any thoughts that you might have related to that. And for those of you who are who don't have it, we see that popping up in the chat. And so the team will work on that as we kind of get ready to go into breakouts. Team, do you want us to take a break here and then you get these over to folks? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, let's do that. We take a 5-minute break, come back at 10:30. Amy, I did resend yours to you. And then we'll check on Luana and Shelly as well. And we'll be back here at 10:30. Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to quickly say thank you for putting us back in the same breakout rooms. It was really nice to be back with people who we started getting to know in our first one.
Thank you. We will definitely make note of that. You know, we're always thinking about because we're working virtually, how we can, you know, have a more interpersonal exchanges. So thank you for that feedback. Appreciate it. Well, all right. So we are back. Hopefully you were able to lean in a little bit with your individual report. We did and have provided a link for you, right, Rebecca, for the compensation report that the NC Center does. I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you scroll up in the chat, y'all should see before everybody, it says everybody, I don't know if you see this, join it. I think that's just for me. Join as a guest. That's probably when you come back from breakout rooms. But as you'll see there, if you scroll up, you'll see a link for our salary and benefits report. They have one for North Carolina. They also have one for that's nationwide. It's updated every 2 years. Members get a discount on the purchase. You also get additional discount if you participate in the survey when it comes out. So there's a link there if you want to learn more about that. We can get you what you need for that.
And we'll probably revisit that a little bit when we do human resources in the coming weeks. But just wanted you to have that. Also, there was a question in the chat about how to utilize, well, that wasn't the question. The question was, can you look at build, thrive, and sustain on a continuum? Like in terms of that, here's the awesomeness around having your data. You can analyze and you can share an interpretation of that data based on kind of your processing and thinking about what it is you have in front of you. So the answer to that question is yes. The way I think about that is you could possibly plot your results once you have those percentages. You could probably plot those results by build, thrive, and sustain. Because you are looking at, you know, what you want to work on in the coming year. You can also change the question that folks are answering when they complete the assessment. So you don't have to necessarily use the question we used. The question might be, what do you want to work on in 3 years? Or, you know, what is the priority? Or, you know, so you can set that up unique for your organization. And SurveyMonkey is a great little tool that you can put information in and you can receive data back or feed that data back, and then you can analyze it and interpret it and do all kinds of reporting with that information. So I can't remember who asked the question, but it's your data. Once you have it, you can work with it how you think it's best for your organization. But thanks for the question. So again, hopefully you were able to get to know your own report a little bit better in terms of your individual assessment. As we've said before, you can have as many folks complete that assessment as you desire to begin to help your stakeholders understand that capacity matters. That's basically what we're getting at. And where you are matters in terms of your ability to be able to do some of the things you want to do. Wow. Now we're going to get into board governance. We're going to focus on board governance, and we have identified some salient pieces of that that we want to share with you. Team, can we go to slide, just as a bridge? Can we go to slide? I'm going back a little bit. The agenda slide is where I'm trying to get to. Sorry, I thought I had it right here. Thank you.
Maybe slide 19.
There we go. Yeah. Thank you. So for today, our focus as it relates to board governance is on duties and expectations. And that lines up with what our number one was under board governance. Financial management and fundraising responsibilities. I think roles and responsibilities was another area. Accountability and evaluation, composition, bylaws, and legal compliance. Hopefully you have that paper, pencil, pen, markers, crayons, you know, whatever it is that you desire. The areas that we're going to focus on are outlined here. So we've got 5 areas that we want to focus on and that we want to complete by the end of our time today. We're going to start with, we can go ahead back to slide 15 now. We're going to start with just taking a look at board of directors, the board of directors, and the board member. Board of directors and the board member. So what we would like for you to do with a piece of paper, just go ahead and divide that paper into 2 sections. So if I'm holding up my paper, let me turn this way, like this, just divide it, have two sections. And then at the top of, on the left side, put board of directors. On the right side, put board member. You can draw a line through that if you like. But again, just a white piece of paper or whatever color you have, fold it in half, board of directors and board member. And what we want you to do with whatever writing utensil that you have chosen, we want you to, when you think of board of directors, we want you to jot down just whatever phrases and terms come to mind for you for the board of directors. And then on the board member side, we want you to do the same. We want you to jot down whatever phrases or terms come to mind for you and and a description of a board member. So Board of Directors, Board Member. And I'm gonna give you just a couple of minutes to etch a sketch that. How many of you know what etch a sketch is?
Showing my age.
We can go back to gallery view. Anybody? I'm dating myself, right? Etch a sketch. Who was that waving? Somebody
That's
was
Carrie. I'm showing my
hey,
age.
Carrie.
I'm there with you.
Alicia, Carrie, etch a sketch. Okay. Yeah. That was a fun toy. That was
You
a
know,
fun.
Toy Story, everybody. Elf.
So on one side, you're going to give me Board of Directors. What phrases come to mind for you? And even if there's an image that you see when you see a Board of Directors, what does that look like? And then on the other side, Board Member, what phrases or terms come to mind for you? And what image comes to mind for you for the Board
Dr.
Member?
Palmer, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you want us to specifically think about our own boards or just boards in general?
You can think about your own board. That
Okay.
works for me. Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. What comes to mind for you? What do you see when you see a board member? Or what comes to mind for you? Or what do you see when you what image comes to mind for you when you think of Board of Directors? And I had you put it on the same page, but if you want to use two separate pieces of paper, you can do that too. What comes to mind for you? I'm gonna give you about 1 more minute on that. Okay, just kind of hold up in your window, maybe just one side, the Board of Directors. Let me, especially if you have an image on there, I'm leaning in so I can see. If you have an image on there, show us what you got. Okay, all right. Woo, Lisa, I need my readers and I got on glasses today.
You, oh my God.
Okay, all right, okay. Just a quick shout out. What words or phrases come to mind for you, Board of Directors, real quick?
Oversight.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Body of people.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Management
Mm-hmm.
Body
experience.
of people.
Okay,
Diverse representation.
thank you. Awesome. In your workbook on page 31, we've given just I'll say a description, right, of a Board of Directors. And we always take some time to think about this as two separate things. We've got the Board of Directors where we're a governing body of a nonprofit. We are trying to help that nonprofit align with specific legal and ethical elements of the work that they do, and we're responsible for that. We serve as an advisory body. We are nominated, voted on, selected to assist, advise, and make policy. And someone said oversight. Yes. And we are working as one body to provide oversight to that nonprofit organization. That is who we are as a collective. And then, of course, we all are individual board members on that board. And what were some of the words that you used to describe the individual board member?
Expertise.
Well connected.
Engaging and dedicated.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Champions
Leaders.
agency vision.
I see skeptical. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that.
Fundraisers.
Hi,
Sebastian, I entered that, and to me, good board members are skeptical. They're asking you questions, they're probing, they're challenging. So not in a bad way, but more in an inquisitive way.
Mhm. And we are doing our due diligence, and we are being good stewards when we are inquiring and asking those questions and getting clarification and so on and so forth. So for those of us who are working right within a nonprofit, and those questions come, as Sebastian shared, it's not a negative. It's let's make sure they're clear. Let's make sure they understand. Let's make sure that we are helping them to be as engaged as possible, because we need them serving in their individual roles as it relates to what it is that we're trying to accomplish as a collective. Each board member has a different reason for being a part of our board. Each board member has a different amount of time that they can, allot in terms of the work that it is that we're doing. So the more clarity we have as a board member, the more effective we can be as a board of directors in collaboration and in partnership with our nonprofit organizations. We want to do a poll real quick. Rebecca, do you want to share with us how we're going to do that?
Sure. We have a quick poll regarding board service that'll launch right now. I can see this. It's asking, are you a current or past board member? We had a little show of hands, but this will give us a graphic display of that. Great, we're approaching 90% participated. You can see that on your screen there. I'll go ahead and end the poll. And we can look at results. All right, can you all see this? Okay, so it looks like we have 43% of you are currently serving on a board. And then 32% indicated that they've never served but would like to one day. And then 22% have served in the past but aren't serving right now. And then we had 3% and never served and don't plan to. That was a new one that I added this time around. We didn't give that option before, but thought it was important that, you have something you could select there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing. So as you think about the board of directors that represent the nonprofit that you are representing today, think about the answer to those questions. How many of them have never served on a board before? How many of them, this is their first time? How many of them are serving on multiple boards? Because that's a reality too, to have a sense of where and how your board of directors, where your board members, kind of where they fall in that, because that can inform us on how we build capacity and what it is that we might need to focus on. I always say that at every board meeting, why not have a little nugget related to board development on the agenda? It's a board meeting, right? So why not have 10 or 15 minutes where we're sharing some nugget about how to be more engaged or how to help the board in its work that it's doing, or as opposed to thinking that we got to have a 3-hour training or a 4-hour training or a 5-hour training. Over time, if you're having a board meeting every month, if you put 10, 15 minutes within that meeting time, you add that up over the year, you've had quite a few hours of board training, if you will. So you can incorporate that. If you have the ability, you can definitely help me be a more engaged board member by, maybe offering some other opportunities. But we do run into time constraints for our board members. And so we have to kind of think about how do we do more with the time that we're given with them as it relates to capacity. On page 31 in your workbook, we have just a little description here. So I, as a board member, in terms of how we have it described, is these are individuals that serve on a board of directors, and the purpose oftentimes for which they're serving, or we hope, is to help us and for them to contribute with strategizing and decision-making, and to help us to have a strong, healthy, impactful representation in the community. You know, that is, that should be a part of our introduction to our organization. And when we're doing the recruiting of our board members, talking about what it is that we're hoping that they can bring to our organization. Very important. And it's just as important to continue to ask that board meeting after board meeting after board meeting. So board of directors, board member. Our strategy and approach to building capacity is a tad bit different when you're helping me enhance my capacity as an individual board member versus helping me enhance my capacity as a member of the board. Just a little different. The poll that Rebecca shared, that was related to the board member. So if I've never served on a board compared to my colleague who's on the board, who is serving on several boards, right? That capacity enhancement or approach to that should be quite different depending on that. And again, it's not all the time, you know, a formal training that we're doing. Sometimes it's little bit by little bit. I did see a question in the chat. I don't know if we can get to it because, but I don't know if it was one question or more, but it was, I couldn't kind of grasp the full.
It's one question right now. Do you want us to save these and answer them later, or do you want us to?
You can give me that one since it's one, and then we'll move on to our next word.
Melissa wants to know, do you have a collection of bite-sized board teaching materials we can consider integrating into every meeting?
What I would say to that, the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has a location called Information Central on its website. And you can go in and you can pull information by topic. And there are articles in there. There's nuggets about board governance in there. And then you can decide what it is that you want to share or what it is that you want to provide for your board at those individual board members. Here's what I say when it comes to kind of training and education, just in general. Keep it simple. You know, maybe it's not anything in that portal, right? Maybe it's something that you just know that your board needs a little bit more information about, you know? So keep it simple. Don't think you have to have a curriculum. Don't think you have to have, you know, this kind of formality to that when you're trying to offer that, you know, as a 10, 15 minute, maybe soundbite. You know,
and I was also going to suggest to that also, Dr. Palmer, that materials you have in this curriculum that we're going through now, there's some very simple things that you can pull out of here as well to use. So flag them as we go through them.
Yeah.
Honestly, my board's smarter than me. So I feel like the, yeah, it's not obvious. I would welcome any ideas from folks who have done this with like a super competent board of what's been helpful for you to share with your board that advances this agenda or this dialogue.
Yeah, I would agree with your colleagues. Don't let your board fool you that they know more than you do. What I would encourage you though, Melissa, try sharing what's trending. You know, you might just, I mean, you can do a Google search and you can pull up, you know, current articles about nonprofit boards and what's happening. Again, keep it real practical. You know, update them on, you know, the center has a public policy space with what's happening in the state of North Carolina related to nonprofits. I mean, there are all sorts of ways that you can inform your board that may not be an outright skill building experience. It may be raising their awareness about something. So I would agree with your colleagues. You'd be surprised, once you start sharing in that regard. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next piece of work. Our next topic is related to kind of the way in which we are to position our board of directors in the organization. So I want you to grab another piece of paper. Do you have another piece, or did you just bring one piece? Do you have another piece? Okay, all right. Where are my got all sorts of office supplies folks? Who has a colored piece of paper? Who has or you got something fancy, or you got, so some of us have all these little trinkets that we keep for facilitation and teaching and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, hopefully you got your piece of paper. And what I want you to do, I want you to draw something for me, okay? I want you to draw an org chart. I want you to draw an org chart. And we're going to give you what it is we want to see on the org chart. And so, team, if we could go to slide 16. Okay. And so take that piece of paper and draw us an org chart that shows these 3 positions or spaces on that org chart. So look at what you have here, and how would you arrange these entities, I'll say. How would you arrange these on an org chart? Try to make it kind of big on a piece of paper, because I'm going to have you hold it up. We're going to go back to gallery view in a minute, and I'm going to have you hold that up. So draw an org chart with these positions. The board of directors. Where does the board of directors, how would we organize this in an org chart with these salient pieces? So so there's a space for the board of directors. There's a space for the executive director. There's a space for volunteers. There's a space for staff, and there's a space for 4 board committees. And those 4 committees could be whatever committees you choose. Okay, let's go back to gallery. Show me what you came up with. What did you come up with? Let me see your org chart. All right, I see. All right, okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I'm going over to the next frame. Keep holding it up so I don't miss anybody. Just trying to get a glimpse as to what you came up with. Okay, okay. All right. Well, we want you to compare and contrast your image with our image. And so, team, show us how we position these different entities on our org chart. And so again, it is board of directors and where we position the board, the executive director, volunteers, staff, and 4 board committees. So compare and contrast your image to our image. Compare and contrast your image to our image. So we are nonprofit organizations. Most of us, there might be a few in the space today that are different, that have a different tax exempt status, but most of us are operating under the 501c3 tax exempt status. And so the board of directors is primary, you know, in terms of setting up the organizations. I don't know why I just turned purple, but when I finish with this, I'm gonna sign out and sign back in, but I just turned purple. But at any rate, Lisa, I see you laughing. I don't know where that came from. So the board of directors is providing leadership to the organization. And then we have 4 different committees. It could be more, it could be 5, could be 10, could be 1. Most of our board of directors minimally have an executive committee. Those are the officers. And then we have our executive director who's working in partnership with the board. Then we have our staff, and then we have our volunteers. Now, we could have added more entities to this, but this is kind of the way in which we have set up our org chart. Any thoughts about this? And Lisa, I'm gonna let you take over with hearing the thoughts, and then I'm gonna sign out and sign back in because I don't know why I turned purple.
So what do you guys think about this? Give us some feedback in terms of how the flow chart compared to what you have. Someone can just come off mute.
This is Megan with City Startup Labs. Mine was actually really similar, which makes me feel good. I also, instead of just lines, I had arrows sort of with going both ways for sort of sharing expertise and information. We have a highly competent staff with lived experience similar to the people we serve. And so that often will inform our board of directors and help them sort of understand things, because not all of them are a similar demographic to the people we serve. And we feel like it's really important for the board to have that experience, if not directly, then at least indirectly.
Good, thank you. Can someone else comment on what they have?
My drawing was very similar, except I had volunteers under staff versus directly from the executive director.
Okay, that's definitely a way to do it.
I may have driven mine. Oh, so
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. I may have drawn mine more out of optimism than reality, I think, but mine was kind of more circular in the sense that volunteers and the board were more embedded kind of within all of the components, as opposed to only being hierarchical in their governance.
So can you explain a little bit more about that when how does that translate over for information flow?
I think I was just thinking about it more from like a working standpoint, and having the board and the volunteers embedded throughout the organization, not only in specific tasks like within the staff.
Okay, okay, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. Someone else?
So something that I think is really different. So I just started as executive director 6 months ago for our organization, and the board actually feels like the executive director is on the same line as the board of directors, and we are partners versus me being accountable to them, which is a very different approach than I was expecting. Because I think there does need to be more direct accountability, more like more how you show in your structure. But they want to see the two boxes equal, which I would love your input on that if you have any. So I can help them understand why, yes, I may lead day to day, but ultimately I'm accountable to them, or should be accountable to them.
Maybe there's a way where you could show that the balance, right, where you're partnered, but you could also maybe have maybe a dotted line that kind of illustrates the accountability. You know, I
I
mean,
like
you
that.
could have, maybe you could reference both in the image.
And
And then
I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it started because the lady who founded the organization, they basically were just she told them what she was doing and then they kind of like checkboxed it, right? Whereas I'm trying to maybe formalize things a little more and put more structure in place, that kind of thing. So, but I like your idea of maybe to transition them to that idea is showing a dotted line for accountability. I like that. Thank you.
Mine, I kind of like what you were talking about. Mine is kind of that way. Instead of having boxes with lines, mine were circles where there was a big circle for the board and then an overlapping for the ED. And then there's boxes that go around for the committees on the board. And below there's boxes for staff and volunteers. And where the board and the ED overlap, that's where accountability rests. So the ED informs and what's the word I'm looking for?
Influences,
Advises,
supports.
kind of in a sense.
Mhm.
The board and the board supervises in a sense or has oversight of the ED. So they are equal in scope in a sense, but they overlap and there's that joint part of accountability for each, if that makes sense.
And I see a couple of hands, so we're going to take those and then kind of move to the next piece of information. Christina, I think you were first, and then Mary, I think I saw your hand after Christina.
Yeah, thank you. So like Stacy was mentioning, for her organization, the person who was the ED or the founder kind of just guided everybody. So me as a new organization, I just started it in May. I'm the visionary. I'm running as the ED, but I also developed or voluntold the board. So it's not at a point where I feel like they can run with it. So I'm still heavily involved in the vision and getting them to understand what their roles are. So, I mean, I did put, and this is great because this has given me a lot of fantastic information to help me to develop the board and who needs to be on it and what they need to do and how I need to organize everything. But I guess at some point, I've got to back out and just be the ED and allow them to run the board. And I don't know when to do that. I don't know when would be the best time. I mean, I guess I would have to let them go through their process. And then at some point I back out, but it's really difficult when it's your baby, you know exactly how you want it to go. And then you're leaving it up to these individuals to drive it.
I think there are some other pieces, and Lisa, chime in because you've served in this capacity before as well, and have that experience. I think the main thing is to keep in mind that as the executive director or president and CEO, I am working in partnership with my board. And hopefully we've given our board members a specific general description of what their responsibilities are. And so that's the starting point. And then from there, each organization is uniquely different. You know, so the org chart is going to look different. And here's the other thing. The org chart is going to look different, possibly, I know this may sound a little scary, from day to day, because it depends on what it is you're working on as to how and when and how and when the board engages. And so, you know, you give us parameters as board members and as a collective, but then as the executive director, I'm responsible for leading and managing the day-to-day operations, and I am informing the board so that they can function. They can't function off of a whole lot if the ED or the president and CEO is not informing them. So I'll leave it at that. But as we go through these other topics and these other management functions, I think it'll all make sense to you as well, Mary. And then I'm going to go to our next piece of information. Board governance is a hot topic. It's always a hot topic. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. So I just had an observation about, I was having trouble trying to figure out where to put the volunteers, because the structure that you displayed for us, that was in my previous board experience. The league is very much a volunteer organization. And so the volunteers are kind of freelancers. They're from the committees. We have a system where we've got online opportunities for volunteering. People may be on different committees. They're sometimes they're working in voter services, sometimes they're working on the education committee, finance, whatever it is. So it was really difficult for me to try to put the volunteer somewhere, because there's some things that are volunteer activities that come from the board, some things that come from the committees. And so that's not, I think someone else said, kind of a free-form floating cloud of volunteers is almost what we're talking about in our circumstance. So that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Did I see another hand? If not, are there a lot of questions, Lisa? Do we need to address those later?
Maybe you can just address real quickly. I think it's an important point to bring up. I'm trying to see. Dory says, I'm an ED who's also serving on the board. And does the board, should they be voting? I think that's what I read.
So as an executive director on a board, you should be ex officio. That really should be kind of your status. So that lends itself to not voting, especially on those things that are related to you. But, what I would encourage, and I know every organization is different and they have different reasons for why they have executive directors or president and CEOs serving. But, a good practice is that you're there as an ex officio member of the board, but not necessarily as a voting member. Is that the only question, Lisa? Can I go on? All right, great. So we want to move into duties and expectations. And in your workbook, I want you to go to page 32 and 33. So we're looking at the board of directors, duties and expectations. We've talked about duties of a board member and so on and so forth. We know we attend meetings. We know that we are expected to do that. That's minimal. But on page 32, you have what we call duties of care, duties of loyalty, and duties of obedience. And this comes out of kind of our legal fiduciary responsibilities as it relates to what we are responsible for as a board and by default as a board member. So we are responsible for taking care of our board, of our nonprofit. We are responsible for a sense of a certain level of loyalty to our board. And we're also responsible for a certain level of, I would say, behavior, a certain type of behavior as it relates to our board. And so when we talk about duty of care, here we're focusing on taking care of the legal, financial aspects of our nonprofit and being a good steward. When we look at duty of loyalty, we're being faithful, we're avoiding conflict of interest, especially for any type of personal gain or benefit. And then duty of obedience. Okay. Duty of obedience. We are paying attention to our 501c3 status and our policies and being compliant when it comes to legal compliances related to having a nonprofit. So this is a way in which we're able to kind of frame what the expectations are, just kind of in general, really, no matter what board it is that we are serving on. And then the other document or resource that we should be referencing related to our duties and expectations is the bylaws. Bylaws are the document that guide the functionality of the board. And so it's important for us to keep the bylaws in some way in front of our board of directors, to remind them that there is this agreement that we have when we become a board member to yield to the bylaws. And that really does help us to understand what the functionality of the board of directors is. Randolph, I see your hand.
Yes, ma'am. So, maybe this is just a question. And so in the last, maybe prior to COVID, so there seems to me a change in like folks' ideas around how their own personal beliefs enter into creeps into our organization, and they're kind of like they have been subtle to me. Like board members may call me and I'm not a, so in our rural communities, it's really become commonplace to throw religion into our mission in a way, from the outside to coming in, and like suggestions like there's certain groups maybe we should align ourselves with. We pride ourselves on definitely thinking about diversity in terms of the work. But I'm just wondering, has anybody had any, folks that may have more political leanings now, or maybe their faith practices entering into some of the work, and then how we might address it. I just had a call yesterday, and it was like, I was, in terms of loyalty to the organization, sometimes I just kind of wonder. So I don't know if anybody's had that experience, and how we may address it from a board. Well, I'm actually the ED, so I work for the board. So I'm just got to be careful how I address it. Any thoughts around that? Anybody seen that?
I'm going to share some nuggets about that, Randolph. And then if any of your colleagues have any suggestions, can you put those in the chat directly to Randolph for me, if you have any thoughts about that. But what I will say to you is that, a nonprofit is an organization, and it is growing and it is changing. Sometimes it feels like every second, right? And so we may have started 10 years ago, and in our bylaws, we have certain expectations, code of conduct, whatever it is, however we've crafted it. But we might sometimes need to go back and revisit those, especially when you start to see salient things occurring that need to be addressed, right? So you bring up religion, you bring up, individuals who serve on the board, and you have to kind of keep in mind, I am who I am. So when I come to your board, if I am rooted in my religion, I'm rooted in my religion as a board member. If I come and I have a faith-based affiliation, I am who I am. I'm bringing all of that with me. When I get there, I should be provided the parameters in which I'm supposed to function on this board. And that should be shared with me ongoingly. And especially when an issue arises, we should be able to kind of identify and share with individuals that serve what those parameters are. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes things just surface, like your phone call. Things just happen, or they just come up. But what we do know is that duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience, those concepts and the premise for those have a legal ground. And so as it relates to our 501c3, so minimally, we can talk in the context and we can educate our board members in the context of that frame to help us all kind of not step into some areas that might cause us problems as it relates to us maintaining our tax exempt status. And I think that is a way to kind of address that in terms of that. But I am who I am. And so when I'm recruited to become a board member, unless something changes after I become a board member, right? But when I'm recruited, when I'm nominated, when I'm voted in, you're getting all of me. And so it's important for me to know what the parameters are, and which is called prevention. And then there are cases when you have like a phone call and it's a little off and you have to do a intervention. And so I think over time, you can help your board members that way. Lisa, I don't know if you have a comment about that or not, but that is an approach that I would highly recommend. Does that help? Randolph, does that help?
Thank you. Yes, it helps. It gives me a starting place.
Yeah. The board responsibilities checklist, we have a checklist there for you to reference. That's on page 33. And that is our section on duties and expectations. Duties and expectations. Do we need a break? Just checking. Sarah
Yes.
says, yes, I see the nodding of the yes, we need a break. All right, Rebecca, is it 3 minutes, 5 minutes? I know we've got work to do, y'all.
I know, I want us to make sure we can get through all the content, and we're already a little bit behind. So could we come back at around 11:35?
Okay.
I know it's not much, but thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Palmer, are you there? As we see her come back on, we'll hit record.
Well, I took a couple of extra minutes, didn't I?
It's all good.
Okay. All right. Our next topic is financial management and fundraising responsibilities. That's our next topic. So we honed in on duties and expectations. And so we're going to move into talking about our board of directors and board governance related to the managing of our finances and the fundraising responsibilities. I mentioned before the break that our bylaws are the go-to place for the governing instructions, right? Governance and oversight, those instructions are found in our bylaws. We can edit, amend, modify our bylaws anytime. It doesn't have to be once a year, for example. We can modify the bylaws as needed. And so in your bylaws, hopefully there is some instructions around or information or inferences around the board of directors and their work related to financial management and their work related to fundraising. Some nonprofits require their board members to give at a certain level, not all of them, as it relates to fundraising. Some nonprofits expect their board members to be significantly a part of whatever the paid staff is doing related to fundraising. The expectation is that the board members are a part of that as well. And so that's important to keep in mind. The other element of financial management that our boards are responsible for, and I thought I heard someone mention that you had just gone through your budgeting process or you just had your budgets approved or something like that. Well, our board of directors is responsible for approving our annual budget. And so as a nonprofit, we should have a budgeting process. And a part of that process is to present that budget to the board, and then the board approves that budget for the next fiscal year. So that's very important. And so we want to share with you kind of a sample budget. And so if I could get the team kind of teed up to do that. We also want to share with you some sample financial statements, because our board of directors is also responsible for overseeing audits of a nonprofit organization. And so we want to share that. So we're going to share three things. The first thing we're going to share is a sample budget. And I do believe that's in our handouts. I think it's in the financial management section, but we'll come back to that. And then we're going to share some financial statements, and we're going to share annual reports. So it's going to be like a show and tell on your screen here. And what we want the takeaway to be is that this is these are the responsibilities of a board of directors. When we do our session on financial management, we're going to do a deeper dive into the particulars. But in terms of thinking about governance and oversight, financial management is a part of that. So team, I'll let you screen share, and I will do the show and tell.
Leslie, are you there? Are you having any trouble? Oh, there we go. She's on it. Thank you.
So this is a real practical budget worksheet. Some of you may be in a startup nonprofit, and so this might be your first time at it. Some of you may be new in your role and you've never had to even engage in such a process. But ultimately, your bookkeeper, your accountant, whoever the professional is that assists with your regular managing of the finances is instrumental in helping with the budgeting. And so basically, when we do budgeting, we're looking at and determining what our current budget should be, meaning going forward the next fiscal year. And then kind of looking at how we did the year before, years before, and then determining a budget based on that, and of course, what our needs are. So there's a revenue section of the budget, and there's an expense section of the budget, and we are responsible for identifying what those dollar amounts are. The next document is the financial statements. And again, this is a highlight because we are going to have a session specifically on financial management. And so what page is, yeah, that's it. And so this is a packet of financial statements. that we identified with a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization. But what we want to pay attention to is to what those financial statements are. So when we look at financial statements, the note you want to make as a board member, we are studying financial statements to determine the financial position of the nonprofit. And I'll repeat that. We are studying financial statements to analyze and to determine the financial position of that nonprofit. So at a board meeting, oftentimes we are presented with financial statements as a monthly report or as a regular reporting related to our finances in alignment with the budget. And so I'll just have you scroll through, team, just so that we can kind of see. So we're looking at specifically these documents, and this comes directly out of an auditor's report. You can scroll through. Yep, you can keep going to the, okay, right here. So here is our statement of financial position or balance sheet. Just want you to kind of remember these. Go ahead. You can continue. That's the second page of that. This is a statement of activities statement. You can go ahead with that. Next page. And then our statement of functional expenses is another document that we have here. Go ahead. Statement of cash flow, you can keep going. Again, this is real, just kind of report out here. And then these are notations that are in the audit. So this is an auditor's report. One of the things that could also be very helpful, I think that is it as far as the actual statements. And then an annual report is where we want to go next. And we're going to be looking at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits annual report. I think it was, who was it that was asking? I'm looking at my screen here. Was it Mary? Was it, who asked the question about my board is very knowledgeable or something to that effect? I can't remember who that was. But here are some pieces of information that you can enlighten your board about the annual report, that is. You can enlighten your board throughout the year. You know, the annual report is done at a point in time in the year, but you can definitely pull information from that annual report and share it with the board at a board meeting ongoingly throughout the year. You know, so these are nuggets that we can provide to keep them in the know. You can keep going. So this is a sample annual report, I believe. Yes. For this same organization that we were looking at the financials with. And so an annual report is a part of what the board of directors is helping to develop by way of approving a budget, for example. And then in the annual report, we see the end result of having managed that budget and what that looks like. You can keep scrolling through. I just want us to kind of see these. And we're going to look at this again when we get to financial management. But as a board member, I am responsible for being aware of the financial condition of the nonprofit agency. And so that is the salient takeaway from all of this. Thank you. If we can go back to gallery, that would be great. So again, just in terms of your, oh, you're showing the NC Center, great. So here's the North Carolina Center's annual report. The focus areas in the, you can go back, the focus areas in the annual report are analyze, collaborate, listen, support. You can go ahead. And keep going. And so we're gonna spend more time learning about annual reports. But the board of directors is responsible for financial management. That's the takeaway. Fundraising, we can go back to the gallery. If you look at page 34 in your workbook, our board of directors is also responsible for helping us with fundraising. And as I said before, oftentimes there are instructions in the bylaws about this in particular, especially if board members are expected to give at a certain level, or they're expected to help fundraise at a certain level. So it may not be that I give the donation, but I'm going to help raise at a certain level each and every year. So that's important to think about. What we put here in your workbook is some points about what fundraising is not. And you know, it is about raising money, but it's not just about raising money. It's also about continuing to keep the needs of our organization in the community, and to share that from a PR standpoint. So that's important for us to remember in terms of thinking about fundraising. Fundraising is not something that we start today thinking that we're going to yield a great return in a week. You know, so if we're struggling with meeting payroll, starting fundraising today isn't going to help us meet payroll in 10 days or 15 days, theoretically. Now, that's not to say that, you know, folks, you might not have a donor that shows up and says, oh, I got $1 million, I just want to send it your way. That could very well happen. But we want to, as a board, we should be thinking about fundraising as a primary responsibility of ours in support of the staff, and it's not uncommon for boards of directors to have a fundraising committee that helps to kind of place us in a space where we can actually do work as a board member by working on a committee. That is very, very important. How many of your boards have a fundraising committee? Just kind of in the chat, just go yes, or oh yeah, I see your hands raised. Or you can use a reaction button and raise your hand or something like that if you have a fundraising committee. That I think that is an effective way of having of getting the board engaged in fundraising, is to have one of their peers leading a committee in which they can do that. But it's an overtime type thing in order for you to really get that momentum. Consistency and frequency is important in fundraising. Consistency, frequency. Yeah. So that's important if we want to have unrestricted dollars in our organization. If we want unrestricted dollars, fundraising is what we want to enhance our capacity of and on. Team, I want to go to our next piece of information, which is fund human resources. So if we could go to that slide, please. Again, I'm doing quite a bit of one-way communication right now in terms of sharing with us what it is we should be paying attention to as it relates to board governance, and what it is we want to continue to educate our board members about. So another responsibility of the board is to ensure that there are funds for human resources, and so a way in which we can do that is we can pay attention to equity, diversity, and inclusion. That is one of the NC Center's principles. You can find that on page 9. I'm sorry, you can find that on page 19 of the Principles and Practices Guide. Is that right? Page 9 of the Principles and Practices Guide, page 19 of your workbook. Did I get that right, Lisa? That was a lot.
That's right. That's right. In your workbook, it's on page 19.
Thank you, thank
Yep.
you. So equity, diversity, inclusion, that should be something top of mind. We should have in play a board recruitment and retention strategy. How are we going to recruit board members and how are we going to retain them? As well as we should be a part of employee recruitment and retention in terms of making funds available. So that's important. We're not going to be able to do our work if we don't have funding for it. And so when we talk about funds for the nonprofit and the responsibility of the board, we should be paying attention to that, as well as professional development for staff and also board development opportunities. And at the NC Center, we really focus on capacity building and paying attention to that as well. So when it comes to this particular area of human resources, we're making sure that there are funds there for that. Making sure there are funds there for that. The next topic, and then after this topic, I want to pose a question. But after this topic, accountability and evaluation. As a board, we should be paying attention to accountability and evaluation of our nonprofit and accountability and evaluation as a board. So we should be paying attention to training and performance. We should be paying attention to who we are as a board and our role versus who our executive director is and their role. We should be paying attention to the board chair's role and functioning, having our board chair or president function in that capacity. And we should know the difference between the board chair and the executive director's role. It's just as important for us to evaluate ourselves as a board, as well as it is for us as a board to evaluate the executive director. And we should also be supporting and leading strategic planning efforts of the nonprofit that we represent. So that is very, very important. I want to draw our attention to, or take us to your workbook. Go to page 35 for me. We're going to look at several pieces of information. And all of what we're going to look at is in alignment with these bullet points. And so we can go back to gallery. And I want us to, make sure that everybody is with me. Page 35 is where we should be. So these are salient areas of focus that we should have related to board governance. And we should be helping our board members be on point with these, because these are pretty significant. We've talked about oversight and we've talked about governance. So we've provided this piece of information for you as a point of reference in terms of what does that really mean. So a board of directors of a nonprofit is responsible for the success of that nonprofit. And we're also responsible for nurturing and protecting this nonprofit in our communities and in the public. And so when we serve on a committee, or when we chair a committee, or when we decide that we're going to be more active in our board of directors work, or as a board member, in general, this is what we are doing. And when we agree to serve on a board, this is what we're committing to. So that's page 35. Page 36. What we've provided for you here, we saw this in the assessment, this need for job descriptions of our board of directors. And so what we have provided is a jump start for you to begin to craft job descriptions for every board member. So as a board member, what do I need to know in terms of my job? If I am a vice chair and not the board chair, we're going to look at that in a minute. Here's what I'm responsible for in general. If I'm a committee chair, if I'm secretary of the board, and or if I'm treasurer of the board. So these are all pieces and information to get you started. Also, this information in general should be found in your bylaws. So if you give me a copy of the bylaws, I should see some information related to the role of the board member or the duties and responsibilities, vice chair, committee chair, secretary, and treasurer. So this is something to get us started. Page 37. This is one of those areas that oftentimes we find ourselves getting a little confused about, and that is the board of directors role versus the executive director's role. So the executive director is not to say in our image here, it's not to say that executive directors don't lead, they do. But they have their primary focus is the day-to-day operations of that 501c3. And then they work in partnership with the board to lead the organization as it relates to what its mission is and what its vision is. And so as a board of directors, we are not responsible for the day-to-day operations when we have an executive director, president, and CEO in place. Some nonprofits are primarily volunteers, like there isn't an executive director or there isn't a president and CEO. And so that functions a little bit differently. But most of our nonprofit organizations have, in terms of the structure, the executive director, president, and CEO is the one that leads the day-to-day. Page 38 is a job description of the board chair. Notice we didn't include the board chair job description in the previous document. We put that as a separate document. And something that might be helpful is to compare and contrast your executive director job description to our job description of the board chair, and just kind of compare and contrast, recognizing that each nonprofit functions differently. But that might be a good exercise for you to do. Because oftentimes we find ourselves dealing with conflict and dealing with challenges because as a board chair, I don't know what my parameters are. Or as an executive director, I don't know what my job is. Where there is a level of general understanding in terms of our 501c3 status, what an executive director's role is versus what the board of directors' role is. So that's real important. Go with me to page 39. I haven't said this much last week and this week, but this is one of my favorite pieces of information that I share and that we provide for you. The difference between the board chair role and the executive director role. As board chair, I'm responsible for providing, advising and supervising the board members, right? And the officers. Those are the people that I'm responsible for giving direction to, as I am informed by the executive director, right? As I am informed by the executive director, that's where the partnership comes in. And some of our nonprofits really get off task when we begin to see a board chair serving and doing functions that the executive director should be doing. Now, it is not uncommon for this to be a reality and for this to make it real difficult for the person who's in the executive director role. It happens. But we have to work to a place where that is not the case. We want to make sure that we're all functioning as we need to. And I'm going to pause here, and I want you to spend some time with this information. And then I want to just do a check-in with all of us. But spend some time looking at this. If there's anything that you don't understand, or if there's something you need for us to clarify, please let us know. This is page 39. Any questions about this particular piece of information?
Dr. Palmer, not to make this section any lengthier, but one of the things that maybe you can just speak to really quickly, how the center recently has encountered organizations, which is a fairly newer model of having co-leadership amongst EDs. And I know you've had some experience with that, especially as it relates with the board. It doesn't change the functions per se, as you just described, but maybe you can just give a little about your experience working with co-leads at a nonprofit.
Thank you. Yes, that is a trend that we're seeing. Both co-chairing of boards and co-directing of the actual nonprofit. So we're seeing a trend with that. And I can see the benefit of that in terms of sharing the work because it's quite a bit of work. But we are seeing that. And I think it's a balancing act though. You have to be real clear about who's going to do what and what responsibilities each person is going to have. But it's definitely a model that several of our nonprofits that we've been working with in the past year that we see, we're starting to see that. But again, it doesn't take away from the foundational principle of what do you expect of me? What are my responsibilities? And do I really understand that? So that is a very important part of that. I see the question in the chat. Again, think about it practically. You know, if I'm co-directing as a ED, I should have some specific responsibilities. And I should be chiming in based on that. If I'm co-chairing as a board member, I'm still an individual board member. I still have an individual vote. I still have individual comments and all of that. And so I think, just think about it in a real practical way in terms of that. You're not, you know, it's not that we are one. We are sharing in the work is really what it boils down to. So, so yeah, that is something that we're seeing. The next thing I want us to do is evaluate your board. Ready. I want you to evaluate your board. So go to page 41 in your book, in your workbook. And we want you to actually evaluate your board. There are 3 sections to this evaluation. Now, you can create an evaluation authentically for your nonprofit, right? And that's basically what we did here for the purpose of training, is we crafted an evaluation to just kind of highlight some of the salient points. So if you are a staff person, then you are evaluating the board from that perspective. If you are an actual board member, then you are evaluating your board from that perspective. So I'm going to go silent here for just a few minutes, and then we're going to move on to our next piece of information. But we do want to pause here and let you just reflect on your board, the board of the nonprofit that you're representing today, and how would you rate them? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. There are 3 sections. The first section is a quantitative rating, and then section 2 is kind of a checklist for enhancement. And then we've got some open-ended questions there. So we just want to give you a little bit of time to spend with this resource. And I do think it's important to evaluate your board on a regular basis. Hold on to that. We're gonna revisit that, but try to complete that between now and when we get back together next week. We're gonna reference that. So in terms of the evaluation, we have two more pieces of information to cover related to board governance, board composition. Here again, the composition of the board should be explained in the bylaws. We're in a season of EDI and DEI acknowledgement. And so that's another element of what we want to think about. What demographics, what characteristics, how many board members, all of those pieces of information are typically in your bylaws to give you an example of board composition. The other thing to think about too is the number of board members and the relevance of that, and the roles and or skills and expertise that you want and desire for your board. Sometimes composition is determined by another source. You know, so you might be a nonprofit that is a part of a bigger network. And so there might be some guidelines that you have to follow related to composition. I know the Smart Start or the Partnership for Children organizations have a certain composition of the board. And so you wanna keep those things in mind. Composition of the board can change if needed. And so that's something to think about. What's real important as it relates to the composition of the board is the executive committee. The executive committee is comprised of the officers. So when you have officers in place, that group of individuals make up the executive committee, and they are working hand in hand with the executive director or president and CEO. That's your board chair, your vice chair, your secretary, your treasurer, and oftentimes committee chairs are a part of that executive committee. So again, an executive committee is very important to support that executive director or president and CEO. And an active executive committee is real important. It really does help as it relates to that. So board composition. The next area, which we've already been covering that like throughout this topic, is bylaws. Bylaws and legal compliance. Bylaws and legal compliance. It is important for board members and the board of directors to understand what's in the bylaws. It's important to keep the bylaws in front of them. Bylaws indicate term limits for board members. It tells us how to address conflict of interest. And so it's real important that we keep that in front of our board of directors as it relates to governance. The other aspect of this particular part of our work today is legal compliance. And recognizing what it is that we need to understand as a board as it relates to legal compliance of a nonprofit. And so I'm going to have the team share with you the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits legal compliance checklist. And this is kind of in terms of the formal pieces of information that we've shared today about board governance. This is the last point. So the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has a checklist in terms of legal compliance. Don't be overwhelmed when you see this checklist, because this checklist is lengthy. But we do want to let you know that this is available to you. And I don't know, Rebecca or Lisa, if you all want to talk a little bit about how they can access this. And then I'll come back to it in terms of that. And the link is in the chat, by the way, folks. But the legal compliance checklist.
Yeah, I can share real quick. Just we update this regularly, and you members can get a free download of it at any point. So you just need to log into your user account on our website and go to the publications page or follow this link, and you can request that. They come through our data management software system, so through Salesforce. So it won't get sent to you until we process that request. So it's not an immediate, but once you've ordered it, you'll get the download from us. And then non-members or folks who are not yet members, you go ahead, you can see the download is $25. And then we have a discounted rate for sustainers and associates of the center. But it is a great way to go through, and even parts of this to do with your board, to like show them. This would give me a lot of peace of mind if I'm serving on a board of an organization and I see that the nonprofit is taking a proactive approach to remain in legal compliance, and to see what parts of this your board may be able to help with. Because like Dr. Palmer said, it can be overwhelming when you first see it, but once you get in the habit of knowing what you need to do to remain in compliance, you can set up systems with your staff to make sure that you all are up to date on things.
So again, this is made available to us. Team, if we could go back to the agenda slide, just as a recap of what we've covered today. I should know what number that is. We just did it a few minutes ago. Slide 5. So our task today, as it relates to board governance and oversight in particular, was for us to spend time on understanding the duties and expectations, to kind of hear the essence of our role as a board as it relates to financial management and fundraising, for us to kind of pay attention to accountability and evaluation. So we as a board should be evaluated as we as a board should be evaluating our ED and or president and CEO. Also in terms of board composition, the size, the demographics, the characteristics of our board, and then the bylaws, which in essence, everything above the bylaws and legal compliance bullet really is incorporated in that last bullet. So the way in which a board functions and the way in which we should go about doing what we call sharing care and loyalty and obedience, the essence of that is found in our bylaws, and it's important to revisit those and to edit those and modify those as we see fit. So that's important. We have covered quite a bit today. And so I would like to kind of hear from all of us. Well, maybe not all, but some of us. Right now you're thinking what, right now you're feeling what. And if we could go back to the gallery, that would be good. Right now you're thinking what, right now you're feeling what. We're 2 sessions in to this institute. You can unmute. You can unmute or you can put it in the chat, however you choose to share. Right now you're thinking, right now you're feeling about this institute. This is session 2.
Okay, we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. But this is great. I mean, over the last couple of days, couple of sessions, I've learned a lot, a lot that I can, since I'm a new organization, it's helping me with the foundation of what I need in order to make sure that I'm setting everything up correctly. And I'm looking at all of the things that I need to be paying attention to make sure that the organization is functioning properly. So although I'm feeling very overwhelmed, I'm excited about getting all of this information. So this is great.
Christina, I would completely agree with what you've just run down and say that it's encouraging though to see a lot of this information is relatable to what is already happening. And so it's nice to see that on that continuum of going back and forth through the principles and through everything we've learned, we don't have to work, well, I in particular don't have to work on everything, but there are bits and pieces that the sessions have helped clarify where the focus and the priorities should be.
Anybody else? Pace yourself. Pace yourself.
And if I can add, I think it's really great that, although Christina, you're new, we may have new EDs on the spectrum to those that are quite seasoned. But even those that are quite seasoned, it would be helpful to still go back and go through the checklist to make sure, or to refresh, to make sure that everything, are you doing everything you do annually, quarterly, just to recap and just make sure that all that's being done. So hopefully the information is from new to more seasoned, it will be helpful. Anything else? Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Palmer. Appreciate all of your input. Just to go on to next week, and to see the dates coming up, we next have our program design, management, and evaluation, which will be another jam-packed session, very interesting. Just want to remind you all once again to if we talked a lot about membership, so if you're interested in becoming a member of the center, we'll make sure we insert that in there for you, the link. Remind you again about our session evaluations. Again, we read them last week. They're very insightful, and we do read them and make changes along the way. And again, reminding you of our Facebook page. A lot of you did sign up today. Thank you. So please continue to do so. Again, next week, bring your paper and pens. Dr. Palmer will have you drawing again and writing things down. And last but not least, we've also had most of our cohorts at the end of a session have been asking us for resources, either that we have mentioned throughout the session or where you can go to get resources about certain things. So we will include in the wraparound, as you'll see Leslie pop up on the screen here. You will also get this. It's a list of resources that pertain to board development and board governance that we think you will find helpful. This is a new thing we're instituting into the we're inputting into the Institute. So please read it, use the resources as you see valuable to yourself. So that concludes our day today. Give you 7 minutes back to start your lunch or finish your lunch. And we'll see you all next week. Bye.
I scanned my stuff and it's not showing me.